us. Everybody else had gone on to other things, and I also, this was the time actually that of course the press were ridiculing Marc. He was putting on weight. They were starting to sort of call him the pork chipolata and all sorts of sarcastic names, and I think that's actually when sort of people who declared themselves to be Marc Bolan fans did start to have the mickey taken out of them at school, and so I don't think Light of Love was one of his better singles.
Light of Love was probably one of the biggest disappointments for that era for T-Rex, because it didn't get to the positions that some of the earlier material had got to, and really, Marc Bolan was starting to panic a bit here. And later on, the Light of Love album was actually released in America. This was again Marc Bolan having yet another attempt at trying to crack this American market, because he was so desperate to do it. And it was actually released as an album, Light of Love, and it just flopped.
Where the American company said, okay, to break America you need these songs, so they put an album together just especially for America.
And the American thing was planned badly. In retrospect, it was planned badly. Marc tried to go in too high, But it's a very difficult situation, when you're mega somewhere, to come somewhere else and no one really cares that much.
The one thing about all great bands who make it in the United States, especially British bands, is you tour America, you meet fantastic musicians, you meet where rock and roll came from, you suck it all in, and I think you're a better musician for it. And I think just touring Europe and just going to Japan, where it was massive, and places like that, and going to America now and then, but not obviously digging in, it sort of restricted his creative sources, and I think it shows, one, that he's sort of a little bit bored, and I think that it shows that there's not enough going into him. He's not sucking in enough of the influences.
I think if Marc would have pursued and worked and toured and stayed with America, they would have liked and loved him and would have had more patience, and he would then eventually have done it. But I know he did have a struggle with the American audiences.
I actually saw Marc in the States by chance. I was on tour with Humble Pie and they were playing a gig out in Long Island, I think. And I didn't know Marc was there, and when I got there we found T-Rex playing away to a sort of a room full of rather drunken, inebriated students from New York. They weren't getting it on at all. They really couldn't get the T-Rex phenomenon. To be honest, he was dying to death. I thought, oh dear, this is embarrassing. And we met on the plane coming back from New York back to London. And neither of us mentioned this terrible gig, and I didn't write about it, and Marc didn't mention it once on the whole journey back. So it's like sort of something you drew a veil over this.
And then of course we have DB, David Bowie, sussing this because he's a hip gentleman then and now, and sort of sliding in, and becoming Ziggy. But without Marc, there could not have been a Ziggy.
He took the glammy rocky thing, even though I don't think Bowie was that glammy rock anyway. He took the glam rock thing and the dressing up thing from Bolan, and of course Bowie cracked it in America, and unfortunately Marc Bolan didn't do it. T-Rex didn't really take off in the States. It was more a British thing. I don't think Americans could see it.
There was the friendship and the association with Bowie and Marc Bolan, but I think Marc always sort of quite resented the fact that David Bowie was having success in America, and he wasn't. But he was trying so hard.
The great thing about David Bowie was that he was, I think, maybe a little bit more in tune or more able to make a change and create new characters, because he was an actor, was able to act, so he could assume characters. And I think because he was probably looking and travelling around and watching what other bands were doing at the time, was able to create all these characters. He could tap into all those energies and use them. I think maybe Marc would probably have had to spend a little bit more time, or spend a little bit more time in America.
They both grew up in London. I think Marc was very much more of a London boy than David was. He managed to sort of be a lot more sort of international. And so I think that was, Marc was basically, I think, a little bit too British to translate to American audiences.
Oh yeah, we're the London boys. Oh yeah, we're the London boys. Don't you remember that we're just the London boys? Oh yeah, we're the London boys.
Every great start go through troughs. They go through ups and downs. You know, Marc was going through a down towards the end of his life.
There was a lot going on. I mean, there was also a vibe where my dad was spending a lot of time in California, and you know, there's a California soul. Like, there's a way of life when you live by the ocean. You know,
Marc was over there, still trying to crack that American market, which was always seemed to be, you know, just a little bit further than his reach. He was there doing his stuff, but it didn't seem to. They didn't understand Marc Bolan. It was a little bit too complicated for them in its concept, and they wanted, you know, something easier to rock and roll with.
This is an illustration of one of the little columns I used to write for Marc in Record Mirror, which was a music paper of the time, which we used in order to try and keep Marc's profile alive while he was spending a lot of time in America. These are basically Marc's own words. I've been here a month now, and I'm looking forward to getting back to England, especially after the exciting success of I Love to Boogie. I've been a US visitor so many times, I now feel more like a time traveller than a rock star. I made my usual visit to Tower Records, as I always do before leaving the City of the Angels. It's a great store, claimed to be the largest in the world. My favourite section are the old blues records, of which they have hundreds. Stayed up late, as is my wont, being basically a nocturnal creeper, and laid down the Bolan bones as the sun rose on Bel Air. Flight flew. As I got into the ancient sunny London, I felt all warm and patriotic when I returned, as I always do when I've been away for more than a month. I wheeled in Baby Roland. My main reason for coming in cooking is the release of my 20th groovy platter, Laser Love.